Spider-Man Blue was my favorite Spider-Man comic of all time, but not anymore. On reread, Spider-Man Life Story tops every other Spider-Man comic by tenfold. But why? You've heard it all before. Because it has an ending. But no, what if I told you it goes a little bit deeper than that? It's emotional, and I haven't actually found myself as invested in a Spider-Man story as such as this in a very long time. There's something about the nostalgic elements of Spider-Man's life that really hit with me throughout the narrative. Watching this character experience things that I've already seen him experience was what really hooked me into the story, whilst also, in most cases, placing a fresh new twist on the events, so I wasn't 100% certain as to what was going to happen. It reminded me of those times when I was a kid, where I would sit down and read a Spider-Man story or watch a Spider-Man story, and I would kind of lose myself in it, kind of using it as an escape from reality. And that's what this book really reminded me of, and it really did hit home. And that's why I'm really proud to be collaborating with today's paid partner, BetterHelp. Now, I'm not going to keep any secrets. I've actually been to therapy myself when someone very close to my family unfortunately passed away. And I know how much therapy can help someone like me who uses Spider-Man as an escape. In fact, it's probably one of the reasons why I love the character so much. I can see myself in someone else, and I can kind of just escape reality for a little bit. However, it never meant that I should ignore what I had going on in here. And at the moment, BetterHelp are generously giving you 10% off if you use my link in the description down below. They will make sure you're connected with a professional that can give you an unbiased opinion and make you feel heard. It also may be the case that face-to-face therapy possibly might not be available near you. That's where BetterHelp come in. You can do it over video call, you can do it over normal phone call, or you can even do it over messaging. Like, you can do it in any medium that you like. All you'll need to do to get started in most cases is to fill out a questionnaire so they get a better understanding of you as a person. Over 4 million people have used BetterHelp services to help with their mental well-being. And if you're struggling, then they've got your back. Use my link in the description down below, like I mentioned, for 10% off. Anyways, let's carry on talking about our favorite webhead. Spider-Man Life Story has an ending. If I had a quid for every time that was said, I'd have like 3 quid, but it's weird it happened more than once. Spider-Man Life Story does have an ending, and at first that's what really pleased me. However, I was more impressed by the storytelling during the comic, moreover where it actually left the characters. If anything, the ending was more underwhelming and was possibly the weakest part of the whole comic book for me personally. But at first, I was actually wrong about Spider-Man Life Story. I didn't have the same opinion on it as I do now, so first, let's just start there. Where was I wrong about this comic book? You see, before I was going to make this video, I was under the impression that yeah, Life Story has an ending, but the storytelling throughout wasn't ever as good as Spider-Man has been before. I'd always use Kraven's Last Hunt as an example. The adaptation done in Spider-Man Life Story is weaker than the actual adaptation of Kraven's Last Hunt. And because I was under the assumption that most of the story was like this, I thought that Life Story lazily adapts and dulls down some of Spider-Man's greatest stories, and that meant that the book overall was just overrated, I guess. But that couldn't be further from the truth. It's true that the version of Last Hunt from Spider-Man Life Story isn't as good as the one written during Spider-Man's peak in the 90s. However, it's also true that Life Story adapted the Clone Saga and Spider-Man's side of the Civil War story just as examples in more satisfying and more conclusive ways that trimmed the fat and streamlined the characters. And most importantly, it was consistent with its themes, its twists, and its characters throughout. Another problem I had before I reread it is that I was under the impression that this book was only for people that understood Spider-Man to a T. But I couldn't be more wrong. In fact, this is probably the thing that I was most wrong about. Yes, if you know nothing about Spider-Man, then Life Story definitely isn't for you. But if you know a little bit about the character, like if you've seen the films, if you've played the games, or even if you've read a comic book here and there, then you will understand Spider-Man Life Story. A lot of the context for the era is defined by Spider-Man throughout the pages, especially the first few of that specific issue, and it's done in such a way that really drags you into the story. Spider-Man himself narrates the book, and he will explain the whole situation to you if you don't get it. Like, for example, Doc Ock might just show up out of nowhere. Yeah, he's just there. But based on our assumptions of Doc Ock from previous Spider-Man media, maybe Spider-Man 2, maybe even Spider-Man PS4, the video game, we already have a based understanding of Doc Ock, but Spider-Man himself in the book will fill in the gaps for us as an audience, so we'll really know where them two are at as characters characters and the relationship they have with each other. For example, one of the first times that we actually meet Doc Ock, he's actually a friend of Peter Parker. To most audiences, that will be alien because Peter Parker and Otto Octavius are never friends with each other. But Peter fills us in on this missing context. He'll tell us, yeah, Doc Ock was a villain, but he's actually trying to reform himself now, so he's a good guy. But where does that leave us now, and what is my opinion on Spider-Man life story at this moment in time? And is it the greatest Spider-Man story ever written? Yes. Yes, it is. Like I was saying, I was mostly impressed by the fact that the stories themselves were handled with so much care and compassion for the character, and in a book that has to tell 10 years in 30-odd pages, it gives you a very good indication as to what Peter Parker's life was like during those 10 years per each issue. You have the youthful feel of his first few years, followed by a more mature, settled Spider-Man alongside Gwen Stacy, then the hatred-fueled man who had lost everything, to a man who was willing to give it all up to save a boy who he saw himself in. It's powerful. It really is. And to break down what I mean by this, I'd like to analyze issue 2 of the series a bit further, aka the 70s. I personally believe that this was the best issue out of all of them. And I believe this for one simple storytelling and narrative reason. They managed to do the Gwen Stacy death with absolute ease without making it entirely obvious as to what was going on. Basically, they subvert your whole expectation of the whole Gwen Stacy story and do it justice at the same time. And this is where I believe Spider-Man Life Story really gets its credit. You see, one of the main opinions on Gwen Stacy I have, and if you follow my channel for a while, then you'll know exactly what it is because I don't shut up about it, is that I believe that she is destined to die no matter what. It's a phenomenon that appears throughout Spider-Man media, no matter where you look. Gwen always dies, and you can always see it coming from an absolute mile off. This in turn ruined Gwen's character. You then say to me, okay, take away the death. Well, what happens then? If you keep her alive, is she a better character for it? Does the story prosper? No, it really doesn't. If she stays alive, that lessens the impact of her character's sole purpose to exist in the first place. It's a paradox. Take her away from Peter, Peter never learns the second most important lesson of loss, but place her in the story and keep her alive, it completely demotivates any sort of sense of purpose that Gwen's character ever had in the first place. Which is why a character like Spider-Gwen came along and gave a new purpose for Gwen Stacy. Gwen Stacy doesn't have to die, in fact she can go on to be something completely different. I go way more into depth with this in my video on this whole subject matter, so you can go check that out after you've watched this. But anyway, this comic manages to do both. We know Gwen is going to die, but they genuinely manage to convince you that she doesn't. For context, during the 70s issue of this story, Peter Parker is actually married to Gwen Stacy. Their lives in this version of the story already span past where they got in the 616 universe, which is already a huge difference. She's also cut all her hair off, so yeah. Not only that, they tie Gwen's story more into Miles Warren. Now, Miles Warren always had a fascination with Gwen Stacy in the 616 universe. It was really creepy, but we don't really need to talk about that. But here in Life Story, they lean in more on what their relationship was like and delve deep into what they mean for each other as well as Peter. Warren is seen as a mentor and even a father figure to both of them, establishing a relationship. After a massive drama regarding Norman Osborn during the previous issue, Harry becomes the Goblin and attacks the lab, looking for some secret held by Warren. This is where he uncovers a hidden room with clones of Peter, Gwen, and himself. It turns out that Warren's obsession with Gwen went that far that he wanted to clone a version of her all to himself, which is really weird, but you know, we move. In a fight between Peter and Harry, the clone tanks are destroyed, and the clones are subsequently killed. Apart from, of course, the clone of Peter Parker, and since he has the same powers, he would obviously go on to become Ben Reilly. The real twist is, after all is said and done, Miles Warren actually reveals that the clone of Gwen is the one that has been living with Peter Parker all of this time, and the real Gwen Stacy has just been killed in the explosion. Distraught and broken, Peter holds Gwen in his arms for one last time, and feeling like she has no place in the world, the clone of Gwen decides to go off and start a new life away from New York, and away from Peter. It's brilliant, and it's a way of killing Gwen by subverting her expectations. Some will say that killing the clone of Gwen and then revealing that it's not the clone is kind of a cop-out, but I'd actually disagree. I believe that it gives more weight to the Clone Saga as a story that was definitely and heavily butchered by Marvel for so many years and ended up being a mess that no one ever really cared about it. However, this story really allows the Clone Saga to become something more, and something more important for the character. Integrating both of these stories here really allowed it to actually mean something, which meant that when obviously Ben Reilly eventually came back later on in the series, he brought all of that baggage back with him, which I think is really, really cool. And it's not just like this for one issue. This is consistent throughout the entire book. It twists, subverts our expectations, but still gives us the classic Spider-Man tales. I really like how a massive theme throughout this book is not forgetting what changed Peter Parker as a character. Throughout each decade, Peter Parker changes significantly based on the events that happen to him during the story. However, during the 900 issues or whatever it is now of Amazing Spider-Man, it's easy to forget about the events that made Peter Parker into the man that we have today. But to be honest, I think after all these years, the writers don't really know what they're doing with the character. However, Spider-Man Life Story is so condensed that it allows you to take these stories by decades and then really see how Peter Parker changes as a person throughout the entire series. So for me, it's not even about the ending, it's about the fact that the character evolves in the first place. I really like the fact that they take Peter and they allow him to develop and grow up as a character. The fact that this story ends, I'm glad it ends, but it's not the ending that gets me, it's the journey. And that's why Spider-Man Life Story, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best, Spider-Man comic that has ever been written. Thanks for watching this video. If you did enjoy, make sure to hit that like button and also make sure to subscribe for more Spider-Man content. Tell me what you think in the comment section down below about Spider-Man Life Story. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Take care and peace.